Bearing witness is to carry the memory of suffering and to attest to the possibility of transformation into new life. The people whose vocation is to commemorate mass trauma serve as a parable for the common experience of humanity, undertaking the psychosocial and spiritual task of rebuilding after trauma.
Remembering what was opens to what can be. I'm Dr. Stephanie Arell.
And I'm Jessica Daugherty, and this is Bearing Witness, the Impact of Memorialization, a companion podcast for Dr. Arell's book, which focuses on the cost of bearing witness and posits that museum and memorial workers hold a place of high honor in the socio-spiritual lexicon.
The topic of the book is essentially what we want to extend into the conversation of the podcast, which is, what is it like to bear witness to trauma at work? That's really the central question. My area is actually theology and trauma. And the American Academy of Religion, when I told them what I was doing, allotted a small amount of money to produce a podcast that intersected thinking about any theological themes, very loosely interpreted. Justice would be one, for instance. The book itself is a composite of about 79 interviews that I did across the globe related to the commemoration of mass trauma. The primary populations were Bosnia, Cambodia, South Africa, Holocaust in Israel and Poland, and the 9/11 Memorial Museum. So those were the 5 locations that were mostly covered. We thought, and the organization thought, that continuing this topic in other places that aren't so covered in the book, thinking more deeply about slavery and the commemoration of slavery and the commemoration of African history in general in the United States, all important topics, and wanted to think about it as kind of an addendum to the book, or maybe a new opening to talk further. So that's the background.
So in this episode, we have the honor of speaking with Tera DuVernay, who is the Deputy Director of Museum and Memorial Operations at the Equal Justice Initiative, which is home to the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. The Equal Justice Initiative, or EJI, was founded in 1989 by Brian Stevenson, the author and esteemed public interest lawyer, with the goal of changing the narrative about race in America. Tera is known for her work as a researcher for several films, including the Academy Award-winning film 13th, about mass criminalization in America. And she's worked with the EJI for over 5 years. Welcome, Tera, and thank you so much for joining us today. Will you just start by telling us a bit about yourself and your work?
So my name is Tera DuVernay. I'm the Deputy Director of Museum and Memorial Operations here at Equal Justice Initiative, located in Montgomery, Alabama, where our sites are. I oversee the museum and the memorial, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. So while I was doing the initial research, you all were in the process of opening. You're busy now. I can't imagine what it was like at the beginning of opening, especially with the amount of press.
Yeah.
We haven't talked to anybody who has reflected on what it was like to open.
Boy.
And so I think that one of the questions is the psychological, emotional, spiritual toll on the people behind starting something at an institution that's become and probably will continue to be an American landmark.
Yeah.
So can you speak to that?
Yeah. 5 years ago, I came on prior to the site's opening, and Equal Justice Initiative was doing great work, but had never had a public-facing, sites that welcomed tons of visitors. We actually kept it pretty quiet just locally as to what we were doing. This is a town that is very steeped in civil rights history. And so most people locally just, there's some civil rights thing happening in their building. And we did that purposely just because we knew it was heavy and we wanted to be able to form the narrative. But when I came on, that I think Equal Justice Initiative may have had 30 people. My staff alone now is about 100 people who work at the sites, with about 10 managers who do different things. Because, when you say I run the museum and the memorial, I think people don't have an appreciation for what that is. It is the museum, it's the memorial, it's the shuttles, it's the security team, it's the e-commerce, it's the 2 gift shops. It is a whole host of things, a contact center, a group sales department. And so it keeps us very busy. In the beginning, we just did not know what to expect as far as visitation. I mean, we opened with a very little quaint, tiny little bookstore. It wasn't even a bookstore. It was just a gift shop with a couple of little merchandise, everything from designing that merchandise, getting it on the shelves and all of that. We had to open. So it was a very hectic, busy time. And at the same time, we were planning a big, grand event, a 3-day summit here where 25,000 people were coming into town. So we were opening doors while also hosting all of these people in town and running a very robust public programming for those 3 days with panelists and all kinds of people flying into town. And so being a part of that opening summit for 3 full days, which included full concerts and panels, and then also wondering how it's going in the bookstore. And we opened in April of 2018, and the national attention we got was focused on the National Memorial, first memorial of its kind, memorializing over 4,000 lynching victims in this country. So it was a big deal, and it was the first of its kind and is. And so that got a lot of the attention. And then the museum, was kind of the one that people, when they got here, was like, oh, there's a museum too. The museum was 10,000 square feet, and we packed a lot into it. It's a narrative museum, completely self-guided. And then we realized we were sold out most of the time. It was very small. There were lines around the block. And so then during the pandemic, when we were kind of had some downtime, and we started to think, well, we never had downtime. From the day we opened the doors, there had never been time to breathe, think, reimagine what could be. And so we took that time, and in 18 months, we went full throttle, and we decided that we were going to expand the museum. So we got a different property down the street. Now it's 40,000 square feet. That experience, it's interesting when we have conversations about how much time should I spend, because it's a minimum to even feel halfway satisfied, like you've got a lot of the content. It's about a 4-hour experience, but there's people who spend all day in there, and they're just like, there's people who have rebooked their flights, like, wait, no, I have to spend another day here. I haven't seen it all. And so the museum experience has now kind of become the thing that people are coming back to see the larger museum, because we were able to really expand it in the way that we're super, super proud of. But yeah, it has been constant. We see a lot of visitors. We average about 25,000 visitors a month. That's a lot of T-shirts. That's a lot of Kleenex. That's a lot of operation to handle and run. We had no idea what it was going to be, and I think it hit us when we were really. It was really unexpected. Really, really a busy time, but such a blessed time. It was really, the opening was absolutely magnificent. I remember looking at pictures recently and thinking about, it was all it was like a daze. Like we were so going to get everything prepared and to get it ready, that it's kind of just all a blur to me. I have to really go back and look at pictures and try to appreciate what it was. I remember me and Mr. Stevenson being at the memorial. We were having a kind of more of a private dedication where we invited all types of religious leaders to come and bless the space. And, I was like, well, we're going to get out there. It's going to be great. But, the weather's so tricky. And our whole fear was, please don't let it rain while we're out there. The weather was holding. It was a beautiful dedication. where we had all types of faith leaders speak and pray over the memorial and some song. And as soon as we get to the corner where it's going to be, of course, the sky opens up. And I remember just having to dip away and hide. I was so emotionally filled. We dreaded it so much, but when it happened, it was just so, it felt like all the people we were honoring were crying tears of joy that they were finally seen. And I just remember feeling so full and so relieved. It was just like a washing. It was very healing, very beautiful. I do remember that distinct moment because I was really overwhelmed by it. But we consider our spaces sacred. We are very, very protective over those spaces. We get lots of requests for lots of things to take place in our museum and our memorial. We're very protective of it. We're protective of it because we do consider them sacred spaces where people are being honored, and we want to protect their honor and their legacy. And so we don't do filming in the memorial or in the museum. And that's all purposeful because we think of these spaces as very special and paying honor to lives that were lost and have come before us. And so even in the museum, we have a beautiful reflection space at the end where we just honor the lives of people who did a lot with a lot less. And it's just a place where I go to reflect. I always go out to the memorial early in the morning before any of the staff and anyone get here. It is just my space where I feel like when I need some fuel, when I need to know if I'm doing it right, I just go out there and I just sit in silence. It brings me great comfort. And it does for lots of people who visit. We have all kinds of people. We have, descendants of lynching victims who come and want to see their family member on the monuments. It's heavy for people, but I don't think that's in a bad way. I think it's in a really beautiful way that people are finally being recognized and their names are finally being said. And so it's a beautiful space. It's a total honor to get up and do this work and work in those spaces every day and make sure that it's all happening and that the visitors have a meaningful experience. I can talk all day about it, but the opening was definitely special. It was incredibly, incredibly busy. I think it was kind of more than we expected. But the fact that we had that convening and that 3-day event, in addition to opening, made it a really, really busy time, but so special. Like we'll never forget it, and the city will never forget it. And we've had so many requests, like, are you going to have that annually and again? And as much as I love putting it on and would want to, we have a lot of other work going on, and so our capacity has limits. But we'll always just reflect on that as a really, really beautiful, beautiful time.
I have one quick question. What's the total staff count at the museum?
I don't know. I probably looked a couple weeks ago, and I think we're at 93.
Oh, wow.
For the museum, memorial, and all of the supportive sites, like collectively.
Collective.
Everything.
93.
Yeah, everything from the warehouse to the shuttle driver to the people who work in the spaces. So yeah, collectively, we're at 93. But again, I have a class of 16 coming in a couple of weeks. So we're constantly growing, and we will need to continue to grow. Yeah. To be quite honest, I think it sounds like a lot. We're really working on a really skeletal staff in the grant.
I expect you to stay closer to 2.
Oh, yeah.
Based on what you've described. So I just, in appreciation of the amount that you do. Thank you.
Yeah, I saw a group, I talked to a group, some of the museums and, people want to come and talk and how did you do it? And just talk about the operation. And they were like, well, who is the director of visitor experience? And well, can we talk to the director of sales? And I was just like, I'm all you got. I don't know what to tell you. It's just me and the team, and we get it done. So it made me appreciate that a lot of people have a lot of moving parts. I think sometimes it's easier just to keep it at a certain scale so that you're managing the visitors and experience instead of managing the people and the employees and all the things. But yes, I recognize that we're a pretty skeletal staff, but it works well. But we're slowly building as we need. Yeah.
Thanks. What is it important to know about what staff needs or what the workers need when they're encountering these people that are coming to a space that has a family legacy, and they're doing a mix of grieving and healing? What support networks are important for you to have in place or to even be aware of in the interplay between the worker and the visitor?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I get that question and just questions about the staff quite a bit for their emotional care and their well-being. I have real relationships. I understand. And I guess when you're here every day doing it, it is different. So when people are asking me that visiting, they're seeing it for the first time, and it's heavy. And it's like, oh my gosh, people come and say, I just don't know how you could do that every day, how you could be here every day. And I think we just see it differently. I certainly do. And so then I'm able to talk to the staff about it. It is an honor. It is a privilege. And we don't ask much of staff, but just to be there to be an open ear. All our staff, we like I said, we buy a lot of Kleenex. All our staff have Kleenex readily available. So I ask them just to be mindful of the human experience. How are people taking it in? Monitor the people. If you see someone emotionally filled and they're crying, offer them a Kleenex, put your hand on their shoulder. They're just there to be a sounding board. They want to listen and hear the reflections of people. They want to give hugs, hand out tissue. But for the actual employees, and I can speak to that because I am one, and I have been in the space, and I have stood in the spots, and I have worked those sites. I think that it is different. It's interesting because when people ask that, I think they're in the moment and they're experiencing it. But this is our home. We live here. We live in that museum. We live in that memorial. We're not seeing it for the first time. We're very clear on the content. They spend a lot of time in training in the museum. And so I guess when you're around it all the time, you don't feel so burdened by all of it. It doesn't feel like a burden. It feels to me like a real blessing. We know the content. We created the content. We just want to offer it. And in offering it, we find, and I find that the employees take great pride in that, right? They take great pride in being able to get up every day and do something that is literally transformative. I see the transformation in people. I watch, surveillance. Sometimes I'm walking through the museum. I see people fall to their knees. I see people crying, sobbing. I see people say, I just didn't know. And what an honor that we get up every morning to do this work and to offer this history. We do think of it as history. This is a narrative museum, and it's about the history of our country that doesn't necessarily always get taught in the classroom. And so people really are unaware for the most part. And so they're dealing with all the emotions and just trying to compartmentalize how they're feeling. And we just help them through that. We're not counselors, we're not, so like I said, we're just there to be a friendly face, offer a helping hand. And we purposely made it so that we don't have necessarily tour guides, or everybody takes this content in the way they will. Some people spend more time in one area than the other. Everybody takes it in, but we feel like it's perfectly curated. And a lot of that is just Brian Stevenson and his absolute brilliance is just what it is. Everything you need to know and why you came here are at these sites. And so we don't do a lot of talking. We're just there to offer support and to ask, is everything okay? Show you where the restroom is. But other than that is what we do. And I think they take great pride in it. And a part of what kind of refuels them and makes them so, there's not a lot of trauma that people think, because you see that what you do every day is literally changing people. It's not something that you think, well, I'm doing this and hopefully it will. We actually see it. We see it in real time happening. And it's incredibly gratifying, rewarding, and just such a huge honor. I get up and I do this work and people say, oh my gosh, you have so much on your plate. How do you do it? It's like I wake up and this is not a job for me. Just like I'm a mother. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and it's a fun time. But I don't wake up every morning and say, oh my gosh, I have to be a mother today. And that's how I feel about this job. I wake up, I do it. It's second nature. I literally couldn't imagine doing anything else. Before working here, I can't, everything was a blur, and this feels so purposeful. And I think it starts from helping that the employees understand that. So when we're doing orientation and I talk like I'm talking now about how passionate I feel about it and what a blessing it is for me, then I think it shifts their thinking that this is not anything that is scary or burdensome. They're so happy to be there. They're so happy to see those transformations. They're so much a part of it. And, sometimes it gets mundane. We have the museum zoned out. There's places that we strategically stand so that you can see this corner and that corner, and you can observe people and you can help people out. And so it also takes a lot of just encouraging the staff that, even when it feels mundane and you're just standing there, look out, look at the people, because the people, the visitors are giving us the fuel because they're there. They showed up. And that alone is an opportunity to make changes. And you see those changes happening in real time. It's so rewarding. It kind of just fuels itself, if you will.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful how you describe sort of like setting the intention for the staff by speaking to them about your passion. When you were talking about your 3-day convention and you then had a ceremony and you brought some religious leaders, I was really interested about who you brought to bless the space and what faiths were they from and did they represent?
Oh, I think we had one from every faith. I mean, we had so many. We had, and there's a beautiful picture. I'm going to send it to you guys because it's my favorite picture. It's literally the memorial is a pile of dirt. This wasn't that it wasn't the opening, but even before, like right when we broke ground, even before, you see this picture of before it even is in full construction. We had rabbis and Catholic priests and bishops and all kinds of people gathered together, praying over the space. And so that's another reason why I definitely think that it's sacred and it's special. But at the opening was the same thing. We invited people from all faith communities, and we have all people from faith communities come all the time, bringing all kinds of folks here. And so, yes, it was a mixture. I mean, we basically just reached out to tons of people from all walks of faith to make sure that we had something special that they could say that they were a part of and got an opportunity to bless. So it was really, really beautiful. Yeah. And I'm going to find that picture and send it to you. Not of the opening, but of the picture. We actually sell it in our bookstore, and it's kind of grainy. You're just kind of like, what is this? But when you look and you realize, oh my gosh, that's just faith leaders praying over this space when it was just getting started. It wasn't even open. It was just dirt. And it's really special. It's one of my favorites.
I kind of want to dig into that just a little bit more. What was important about including all those different religions and faiths?
Yeah, I think that we just wanted to be inclusive of all faiths because we feel like all walks of faith in life are special. But I will tell you that all the things that happened, while it's a collective thought process, our executive director, Brian Stevenson, is truly one of the most thoughtful people that I know. And he is the one that says we need to invite people from faith communities. And all of this is truly his brainchild, this is his heart. But he is thoughtful in those ways and deeply connected and wanted to make sure that we did that.
This is so interesting what you're saying. Just 2 remarks that strike me. One has to do with the possibility of having interfaith conversations around these issues of trauma. And I just was talking to somebody at the Holocaust Museum in DC who read a chapter of the book. It's got a theological angle on it because that's my discipline. And she was actually asking me what would happen at these sites if we had more interfaith conversations. When you were talking about the sacredness of the place, one of the images that keeps coming to mind are the jars of soil.
Yeah.
So could you talk about that a little bit, and maybe in relationship to it being sacred, maybe not, but that's an interesting sort of very significant detail that space presents.
Yeah.
To make absence presence, so to speak.
Yeah. So I think, when we talk about the sacredness of the space, it's just that it's the way that you would approach a cemetery, if you will. You're stepping on land that's honoring the lives of people, and we do that in both of our spaces. The memorial, it is something that when you see it, it's just you're overwhelmed by what it is, and it's open and it's confined at the same time. When you talk about the soil collection, we have an exhibit in our Peace and Justice Memorial Center, which is directly across the street from the memorial. It's just like a supportive site. When we do public programming, we do it there. So we have some soil jars there, but we have a huge soil jar exhibit in the museum. And that is, basically asking members of communities where people were lynched to volunteer to go out, and we give them an emblem, we give them the soil jar, we give them, a history and a kind of a bio on the person that we've researched and what happened to them and where it happened. We have people who are doing research on staff who pinpoint the location that it happened. And we ask people to go out and collect soil from lynching sites as just our way of honoring the place where their lives were taken and honoring their lives. And so we've collected soil from all over the country by volunteers, and folks have brought them in to us. We've gone and picked them up, whatever it took, and we place them in the jars with the names of the lynching victim, and we put their dates. And it's when you see it, and we've expanded it since we had more room in our new museum, but you see it's an entire wall. And just seeing that and realizing all of those jars represent a life, it's really impactful. It's really emotional, even just for that visual, also just for the act of doing that. And I've collected soil. I volunteered to do it even before I worked here. And then I've done it since I've worked here. And I just think that it is something so moving about actually doing it and finding your location and, parking and, you can go with a group of people, you can go by yourself. And I've done it a few times, and it's rewarding, it's humbling. Obviously, it's an honor to say, I get to go and collect this so that I can take it back to Equal Justice Initiative so they can put it in the museum so that that person's life is honored. And so we work with people who volunteer and get all kinds of stories about how meaningful it was to do it. It certainly was for me. It's very emotional to do it. There's all kinds of interactions that people have when they're doing it. And so, yes, that's one way that we consider the space sacred. And when we talk about the sacredness of the space, we're just talking about honoring it in a way that is reverential and respectful, because we do think these sites are worthy of that for sure. And I know that it's an attraction for a lot of people, but it's so much more than that for us. And we just want to honor what it is and keep the integrity of the space. And we work really hard to do that.
So I went to about 9 different countries. So Cambodia, Bosnia, Israel, Poland, to think about and with Memorial Museum staff related to where the space was located in these larger narratives, political, economic, in relationship to justice, in relationship to religion. And as one could suspect, every particular location has its own situation.
Yeah.
As the topic gets a little more narrow, to think specifically about trauma, a question that I have relates to how would you situate the Memorial Museum in the trauma dialectic between the will to proclaim aloud the reality of horror and the will to deny the horror, which is ultimately, in this logic of trauma, the perpetrator's wish.
Yeah, I think the word trauma comes up a lot when we talk about the sites, and I think that is on all ends, all sides, right? I talk to people from all walks of life who feel frightened, who feel like they don't want to confront, others who embrace it. I think it's so important to have a reckoning with the history of this country and talk honestly about it, because that's how we get to a different place. I think, while a lot of the things that we talk about in our spaces are undoubtedly traumatic, I just think there's something very unhealthy about, sweeping it under the rug. I think there's a real healing in confronting the trauma. It's a real healing in educating people about what that trauma was and still is, because it is still alive and has residual effects on everything. We kind of have our museum section out in errors, and our last error is mass incarceration, which we think is basically slavery evolved. And so confronting that trauma and that past, there's a healing in it. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for healing all over. And I think it's just been so suppressed for so long for fear of what it would do. And we have just found it to just be the total opposite. It really is healing. And we've had people reluctant to come who still came and have been completely transformed. And we see that. And I think there's just no greater, there's, when you think about the risk of I feel like the risk, I feel like the reward of what we see and know to be true with the interaction from visitors just far outweigh, anybody who's apprehensive about the trauma they may have to confront. It's a healing, and I truly believe that. And I have had that reconfirmed time and time again. Every single day that we're here, we see it. So I know it to be true.
Beautiful. I wanted to ask a little bit about the staff, because you mentioned visitors who come who have maybe ancestral lineage attached to some of the names mentioned in your memorials. But what about the staff? In our conversations with others, we found that often they may have actual personal connections to the story that's being told in the particular place that they're working. So I wondered if any of your staff have ties to Montgomery or people who were listed here.
Yeah, so all of our museum and memorial staff, they live in Montgomery. Most of them are from here. The majority are from here. We have an exhibit on voting rights, and we honor Henrietta Hunt. And in putting together something for Miss Hunt to come and see her in the museum being honored, I talked to the staff and I was like, yes, we have Miss Hunt, and I'd like to get a picture with her near her. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's my aunt. So they are they're very tied into the community, and this community is so rich and steeped into the movement, civil rights, just the legacy. There's a lot of legacy here, even with the staff. That's one example, but we have all kinds of examples of that. So yes, they're very related they understand where they're at. There's a lot of history. I mean, our museum and memorial is kind of nestled in downtown Montgomery. We are literally walked from the riverfront where enslaved people were trafficked in and marched down Commerce. Our EJI office is on Commerce. In fact, the office that I'm sitting in is a site of a former slave warehouse. And so we are, they're very in tune with the history of Montgomery because they're from here, and their parents are from here, and their grandmothers are from here, and their grandfathers. So yeah, the majority of the staff that work at the sites are from Montgomery or the surrounding areas. And we all thought it was really important to make sure that we had people who were locally deep rooted in family legacy. And, we see that all the time. We just actually had some students come from a local high school, and we're at the memorial and saw the county that they were from and their last name, but was a little confused. High school student. She called her mother. And the person who told me about this was actually the educator that brought them. but called her mother and, kind of was like, this is the county and our last name. Do you know anything about this? And then she got on the phone and they three-wayed the grandmother, and then they all got on the phone, and it was just it's an emotion time. So this is something that the community and the employees, they're definitely connected to. At the memorial, we have staff who are related to victims of lynching. And so obviously they see it as an honor to be able to do something every day that honors the lives of their loved ones.
Beautiful. I also wanted to kind of bring us back to the idea of, bringing the dirt to the memorial and museum as a form of making sacred and honoring. But I read an article where a county far, far away is maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, are people outside of the city where you are they petitioning to have elements or pieces that you're creating that list names of people who were lynched or murdered?
Yeah.
And then are you sending pieces out? Are you expanding in a non-localized way?
Yes. Part of our community remembrance, and I'll be sure to send you a link on our community remembrance. So the part of that is basically working with communities all over the country who have lynchings, and these communities come together. They build a team of people who start to have conversations and talk about the whole process. And then eventually they work to put up markers, and EJI supplies those markers and helps organize a ceremony where markers go up that say this person was lynched and this is a part of the story. So yes, we have markers all over the country. And on EJI.org, there's a link for community remembrance, and you can read all about that, and I'll be sure to share that with you. But yes, we have branched out, and we provide assistance, and we help people get to that place. And we put up our community remembrance markers. In fact, we have a new installation at the memorial that we also did during the pandemic. So we have now a new sculpture piece that basically highlights community members who have done this work and who have claimed their marker. And so it's really beautiful, but it is a community effort, and people from different communities reach out and they say they want to do it. And then we have a team of people who work with them, and that's called our Community Remembrance Project. So yeah, you can see more about that on our website. But yeah, it's a big effort, an initiative that we started, and it's going really well, and it's healing communities, and it's having folks engage and get together in their communities and have honest conversation and learn more. And so yeah, it's been really great. But yes, we're all over.
Another quick question in relationship to time: what does it mean to heal?
Yeah. For me personally, what it means to heal is to address, right? For me, if you have a cut, to not address it, then it just becomes something different. So to heal for me means to address it, to confront it, right? And then there's healing in that. It's just like therapy. If you don't talk about it, you probably can't heal from it. So talking about it is so important. Learning about it, talking about it, having dialogue, having discussion. There's a healing in it. It works just like it would in therapy. You have to confront what's going on, what happened, so that you can learn from it and heal. And so I think healing is just being brave enough to confront it. And we've done that here, and I see that healing, like I said, happening every day. And it's really beautiful. If you just walk through the door, if you can get yourself through it, then you'll find yourself at the other end, and you'll be able to say, I did that. I got through it. And it just wasn't as bad because I was able to just process it, right? And be with your own thoughts and your own feelings and feel. I think healing for me is feeling. You don't have to be worried that it might be uncomfortable, that it might be scary, that it might spark some emotions of anger or frustration or guilt. You just feel. You feel and you heal.
Wow.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for all of this insight that you offer.
Yeah.
And the work that you're doing and continue to do in this very active and ongoing history that's occurring right before our eyes. So thanks for the time.
Well, it was such a pleasure to talk to you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're so welcome. Thank you so much.
Nice to meet you, Tera.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Bearing Witness, the Impact of Memorialization with Dr. Stephanie Arel. For more information about Tera DuVernay and her work at the Legacy Museum, From Enslavement to Mass Incarceration, and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, please visit the Equal Justice Initiative website at eji.org. This episode is one of 3 episodes that discuss the topic of memorialization and commemoration of the numerous lives lost and affected by the Atlantic slave trade. Please be sure to listen to our 2 other episodes in conversation with the Whitney Plantation in Louisiana and Les Anneaux de la Mémoire in Nantes, France. This podcast is brought to you by Dr. Stephanie Arel with funding support from the American Academy of Religion and is produced by Shrine 13. For more information, please visit shrine13.org and stephaniearel.com.